All right. So good afternoon, everybody. This is Abaya, Jivamaya Yoga Wisdom Talks, Wednesday, September the 30th. And we are here today with David Crow, who I'm truly not quite sure how to introduce because he is just quite amazing in every possible way. A master herbalist, just so renowned worldwide for his knowledge of plant medicine, a licensed acupuncturist, the list goes on. Author of several books, but one of my favorites, which is In Search of the Buddha, In Search of the Medicine Buddha. So it's just such a huge honor that David is giving us this time this afternoon to speak about the last of the October subject of spiritual healing practices. And today we are dealing with smell, but in order to deal with smell, we need to deal with plants. So I would like to start and just say, welcome, David. Thank you so much. And maybe a little bit about your journey and how you came to have this remarkable relationship with plants.
Well, thank you for the generous introduction, the appreciation. And it's a very long story. I will keep it very short, but basically I was fortunate to be introduced to cultures outside of the United States when I was very young. And I was influenced by that. I became interested at a young age in other cultures and continued my travels as soon as I could. Once I left home, I traveled in Central America extensively, and I came in contact with ethnobotanical traditions when I was still a teenager, basically. And through those contacts, I learned that, oh, there's a big world out there of ancient knowledge that wasn't happening in the United States, and that there were cultures that had been on Earth for a very long time. And I wasn't part of those cultures, and I became very intrigued, and it ended up being a major theme throughout my life, travel, studying old cultures, studying old traditions, and specifically the ethnobotanical cultures and traditions, but those are all woven inseparably into the environment, the ecology, and the spiritual traditions. And so really my interests encompassed all of those fields. And so I was very fortunate. I found myself participating in many ceremonies in different parts of the world. I found myself studying with many teachers in different parts of the world. So it's been everything from, some entheogenic experiences in traditional ceremonies to meeting some of the real true spiritual teachers of the Himalayas. I was very fortunate to meet some holy people, enlightened people, including having some time with the Dalai Lama and with Kalu Rinpoche the Elder and with the Dharma Master Xindao in Taiwan. And I was always interested in these lineages of meditation practice. And I was always interested in the plant medicine. So my connection to China and Chinese medicine started at a very young age also. And I became one of the first students to graduate from the first acupuncture college in the United States. I was in the second graduating class actually in 1984 and went into clinical practice after that. So it's been going on now for 35 years in terms of professional practice of medicine. But I was also drawn to studying Tibetan medicine through my connection with the Tibetan Buddhist community, first in San Francisco and then in the Kathmandu Valley. I spent a total of 2 years in Kathmandu studying Tibetan medicine with a teacher of Tibetan medicine who was very classically trained, Dr. Galwang Chopo, who's a main person in the book that you showed so generously, In Search of the Medicine Buddha. It's about him a lot, actually. And And it was a very classic kind of apprenticeship where I studied with him every day in his clinic and listened to the pulses of the patients and helped the monks make medicines, and went into the forest and gathered the herbs and chopped things, pulverized and cooked things and all of that. And that's a lot of what the book is about, actually. But then in that 2 years when I was in Kathmandu, I also studied with 9 other doctors, Ayurvedic doctors. 8 of them were men, 1 of them was a woman. So altogether, over a period of about 10 years, coming and going to Kathmandu and Nepal in general, and India also, I have made 12 trips to Asia, 6 trips to Nepal and 6 trips to India, and studied a variety of things, including several tours of India to study Ayurveda, and taking groups of people to study Ayurveda, and studying the plant medicine systems, and later studying specifically the aromatic plants and distillation of essential oils. And out of that came my little company, Floracopeia, and several other books and clinical practice, and it goes on like that. So all of these things are all woven together in my consciousness, a very strong association with meditation practice, with the spiritual dimensions of Asian medicine itself, strong links also to South and Central America, and then strong links also to a lot of the agricultural projects that we have going on in the Mediterranean. And it's just grown like that. So it's it's a diverse palette of different interests, but basically I can sum it all up and say it's some kind of synthesis of medicine and spirituality and ecology altogether. So that's a very short, abbreviated version.
It's amazing. And to clarify, would it be fair to say that Tibetan medicine is a mix of the traditions of both traditional Chinese medicine and Ayurveda? Would that be an accurate description of what Tibetan medicine is?
To some degree, that's true, but let's expand it a little bit. And
Okay.
we can say that all of these Asian medical systems influenced each other tremendously, because there was a lot of dialogue, because there was a lot more travel, and there were actually medical conferences and things where doctors would get together over vast distances, really. It was a very interesting hybrid of things. Now, Ayurvedic medicine, Tibetan medicine, and Chinese medicine all share a lot of the same basic principles. And also Unani medicine, which is Arabic medicine, and Greek medicine also. So there was a universal kind of cosmology of energies and elements that were the basis. And so obviously there was a lot of dialogue between all these systems. But then in each geographical region, it was mixed together with its own botanical species and its own spiritual lineages. So Ayurveda in India is entwined with several spiritual lineages. Certain things came from Tantra, and certain things came from the Vedas. And then there was also quite a lot of interface with Buddhism and specifically Vipassana, which also incorporates the same 5 element system, for example, of contemplating the body sensations. So what we see then is in the classical Asian traditions that the medical systems are inseparable from the spiritual lineages of the culture they came from. So Chinese medicine is inseparable from Taoism, and Qigong is one of the main spiritual meditation practices, and Taoist alchemy and so forth. And then in Ayurveda, woven together with Tantra and the Vedas and Buddhism. And then in Tibetan medicine, it was woven together with Tantra and with Buddhist philosophy and practice, and also with its indigenous shamanic traditions. Okay, so if you look at each culture, they all had certain aspects of these things all woven together. So Taoism includes the shamanic aspect. Tibetan medicine includes an alchemical aspect, and so forth. And so they did influence each other quite a bit. But the similarities are greater than the differences if you look below the surface. It looks like they're using different herbs, but really herbs are universally distributed. It's not like there is such a thing as an Ayurvedic herb. There's an herb that's been here for tens of millions of years, and then there's people who describe it according to Ayurvedic language, or people who describe it according to Tibetan language or Greek medical language or Chinese medicine, like that. So the systems all influenced each other without a doubt, but for the most part, we see that there's more commonality than differences. And the commonality are the plants. Many plants are in common, but there's also some different plants. Every medical tradition has in common some associated spiritual lineage, and so forth. So that's a more holistic way of looking at it. Now, all of this in Asia is, however, significantly different than in places such as South America, where the medical system was not structured according to a cosmology as much. The unique thing about all of these medical systems in Asia is that they all have a shared cosmology of energies and elements, okay? Whereas in South America, you have things that are built on a completely different foundation, which is the cosmology of shamanism. And that is based very much on the relationship with entheogens, altered states of consciousness, and interspecies communication, you see. So in these traditions, you see that there's not a clear system. There are some aspects of shamanic medicine where the plants are classified hot, cold, dry, wet, all of this kind of thing. But it is very, very different. It's based much more on a kind of personal relationship with the plants at a deep spiritual, even interspecies communication level. So that's what's unique about the broader Asian medical systems compared to the shamanic system. But the shamanic systems were also there, woven into the Asian medical system as well. So that's a quick overview of what botanical medicine looks like.
Wow, fascinating. So last night I decided, all right, well, let me thumb through this book literally like this. Let's see what page I open to. Let's see what it says. And maybe this is going to be the question. And I came to the conversation that you had with Dr. Tiwari about plants, and where he says the only difference between plants and humans is that we can express our views and feelings in words. And he goes on to say how, in a sense, quote unquote, human, how alive plants are. They just speak a different language. And I think that in today's world, we either don't know that or we have forgotten. And so I guess my question to you is, how do we come back to that place where we can honor this planet, where we can honor the plants, the trees, all the bugs, all the birds, all the nests, everything, and just understand it to be part of the entire system, and get away from this arrogance that humans seem to have, that we're better than any other living species on the world, in the planet. And I think it's on everyone's mind at this time, so we should address it.
Can I talk for a few hours?
Yeah, sure. I think everyone would be delighted.
Okay. Well, no, I am aware that we have a time constraint of about 15 more minutes. And so if you don't mind, I will just start unpacking the answers here, because what you're asking is full of many, many topics, okay, right. Many topics. So let's start with the beginning, which is plant consciousness. You know, that's where you started your question. And Ayurveda obviously knows about plant consciousness. And that's what Dr. Tiwari was talking about in that particular lesson. And he goes on to talk about the verses, the hymns, and the Vedas that are part of the Soma tradition. And the Soma tradition was an old mystery cult that used some type of entheogen. And the Vedas were actually the earliest writings in the world. And the first writings were hymns to some unknown psychedelic plant that people were ingesting, and it was transporting them into the realm of the light. Okay. And so that's an amazing thing, actually, just to consider that the world's oldest scriptures are actually hymns to a psychedelic plant that were being used generation after generation after generation and renowned all over the old world to such a degree that the Taoist hermits in China were starting to experiment with plants, trying to find what would make them immortal. You see, because Soma was renowned to make people immortal. And what that meant was that it lifted us to a state of consciousness that was immortal. All right. It didn't mean that people lived forever. They'd still be here, but it meant that it had a transcendent effect on consciousness. And this is one example of a mystery cult that went on for a very long time, publicly, involved the entire culture, was very famous, drew people from all over the old world, and was the basis of what became one of the world's major religions. And we see the counterpart. Another example of that is the Eleusinian mysteries in Greece. And they also had some kind of drink called kykeon, and this was a secret cult, but everybody was welcome to join. And it went on for over 1,000 years. And nobody ever disclosed the secret. And the reason that was postulated by historians that it was never talked about, because you had everybody coming. You had everybody of all classes of people coming from all over the old world every single year to participate in the ceremony and have this kind of peak experience. And it was what historians figure the reason that the ceremony was never revealed and that the recipe for the kykeon was never revealed was that the experience was so profound that people simply couldn't talk about it. All right. Now, the reason that I'm taking a few minutes to describe these two entheogenic traditions is because they had a profoundly humanizing effect. All right. And there's actually a beautiful quote that was, I believe it's actually inscribed on the temple where they did it. And it was to the effect that this is what is necessary. This ceremony, this mystery, this experience of the divine is what is necessary to lift people out of their barbaric ways. And so that's one answer to your question, is that we actually need to have illumination on a collective level. And in the past, there were institutions, public institutions, that were maintained by priests and priestesses for, collectively thousands of years that undoubtedly countless people were initiated into, and they had this kind of experience. And it took people to a realm of light. Now this is very interesting because the great psychiatrist Carl Jung was once asked at the end of his life, do people change? And he said, no, unless they are touched by the spirit. Okay, now this is relevant to your question also, because we're at a crucial time. And if we don't get touched by the spirit, then we're not going to, be transported out of our barbaric ways. And I think we can see quite easily that we are descending into more and more barbaric ways with, all the issues that we are facing, that it's bringing out the worst in people. It's bringing out the best and it's bringing out the worst. And that's probably the future, okay, is that people are going to find the best in themselves, find their strength. They're going to use it as a spiritual opportunity. Quite a number of people will probably become enlightened, and a lot of people are going to suffer terribly, and it will bring out the worst of their human nature. So this is one answer, is that we need to get back into a sacred relationship with plants. And there are these kinds of traditions that are still going on. For example, a lot of people now know about ayahuasca, and they know about the peyote ceremony, and they go to these things. There's even a kind of ecotourism now in the Amazon. I mean, you can actually schedule, a visit to an ayahuasca retreat center, like on TripAdvisor now, So the problem is that this is all commercialized and commodified and so forth. And it's not the old tradition, but at the same time, for some people, it's a real breakthrough experience. Now, that's one part of an answer. And I'm not an advocate that everybody think about entheogens. I'm just saying that this is one aspect of a sacred relationship with plants. But the answer to your question is recognizing the sacredness of everything. And plants give us an opportunity to do that every time we eat. Okay, we can recognize the sacredness of food, and all that will have to happen for us to start really appreciating food is for hunger to come. And hunger will probably be one of the manifestations of the global disorder, the economic disorder breakdown that's happening. Hunger is already there, and it will become more widespread. And atmospheric ecological disorder will affect the production of the food, and hunger will come from that. You see, and then from hunger comes a great appreciation for plants and animals, because if we don't have them, then we can't survive. You see, so a lot of the spiritual traditions, especially spiritual practices associated with agriculture and animals, you see, have always been based on the recognition that we depend on plants and we depend on animals. And the spiritual traditions are also very much woven into appreciation of the elements like water, air, and soil, and all of this. And so really human spirituality goes back to the recognition that we are dependent on energies and elements and intelligences that are greater than we are. And this is the really big opportunity for a collective spiritual experience, a collective spiritual awakening. Now, this is linked to a broader answer to your question. Where is this all going? What can we do? All right. And ultimately, it comes down to us being able to have our priorities straight on a collective basis. And obviously, I think we can say that we've got kind of two different species of humans right now running around, especially in America. We have those that are educated, those that are not so educated, all right? Those that are sometimes even willfully ignorant, all right? And then we have those that are relatively well nourished and have good cognitive development. And then we have a whole population of people whose brains really are not working right. And that's manifesting in all kinds of ways that we know medically, like the epidemic of cognitive decline and neurodegenerative conditions and so forth. And this is partly nutrition, and it's partly environmental toxin and so forth. So we also have this kind of polarity in the population of people who really understand the urgency, the critical nature of what's happening ecologically. And there's still a huge percentage of people in the world who just don't get it yet. Okay. Now, I think that this is not going to last much longer. And I think that what's happening now, the acceleration of the natural disasters that are happening, is going to continue, and that suddenly we're not going to be able to escape from the reality that's happening. There will be no more denial about global warming. There will be no more denial about the climate emergency, because it will be affecting everybody. And then we will have an opportunity for a spiritual collective awakening, all right? I think we're not there yet because there's so many people who have not quite reached that level of awareness. But here's the parallel in medicine, all right? At an individual level, we are approaching getting a collective terminal diagnosis, all right? And scientists, they are increasingly adamant that we're running out of time ecologically to do anything. Now, if anything is to be done, it's going to have to be done on a large scale, and it's going to have to be done quickly. And that means that all of humanity is going to have its priorities straight. And we're going to have to understand that most of what humans are interested in is meaningless and has absolutely nothing to do with the biological imperative that we have to take care of the biosphere. And the number one solution is we have to replant it, you see, because the plants created the habitable world for us to come into as a species. And the plants regulate the weather, they regulate the elements externally. And that's what they do internally in the body also with our food. And when we consume herbal medicine, they are regulating the internal ecosphere in the same way that they regulate the external ecosphere, right? So in order for this awakening to happen, it appears that we've had a window of time where we have had the opportunity, and those who have been educated and knowledgeable and aware of these kinds of things have been spreading the message and doing the projects and all these kinds of things, but it has not taken hold at a collective level. It has to happen from the highest level on down. And it's just happening sort of here and there at the grassroots level, but it's not, and that's great. You know, it's so much positive, so many positive developments have happened, but it's got to start at the top instead. And so what that means is most likely, and this is where I think it's going, I think that we're going to just be getting more and more critical, urgent wake-up calls. And it's like the warning signs that are going off in the body of a person with an acute disease. And at a certain point, if they don't pay attention to it, then the doctor is going to say, you've got 6 months to live. And at a certain point, okay, it's entirely possible, and I think this is what we have to be honest about here. I think it's entirely possible that at some point the scientists are going to say, humanity has 20 more years, you know, and then things are going to get really interesting, okay, because if we have these windows of this narrowing window of time, and everybody is starting to wake up, and it's kind of a race. Can humanity collectively wake up in time to change itself? Just like can a person with a potentially terminal illness change their lifestyle fast enough? You know, that's what the race is. And as long as we're in this phase, there's always hope that there could be a collective epiphany, and that suddenly everybody realizes that things like the presidential debate that happened last night are just completely irrelevant. They have absolutely nothing to do with our human priorities right now, that it's all a sideshow. And we've got to deal with the biological issues, because without water, we're not going to survive. And without plants, we're not going to survive. And without regular weather seasonal balance, we're not going to survive. And that opportunity is there now. And it could be a beautiful, wonderful kind of thing where people start to really get it collectively, and we all get on the same page and our priorities change. And I think that so many things are starting to come all at once, whether it's the fires in California or Australia or the Amazon or Siberia all happening, or whether it's COVID or all this stuff all together. I think that's what's going to make people really wake up. Okay, now there's the opportunity, the possibility that that could happen. And the answer is going to be biological. It's not going to be geoengineering. It's going to be replanting, all right? Because replanting the biosphere is what is necessary to restore the elemental balance. And this is known and widely discussed in scientific communities, okay? So it's not politics that will save us, it's plants that will save us. And that's the link between using plants for medicine, plants for food, and plants for healing the environment. And that's why natural medicine is such an important doorway for people, because when we start to connect with the plants, we start to also become more health conscious about our diet. And the more we are conscious about our diet, the more we are supporting ecological agriculture. And ecological agriculture is one of the big keys to reversing the climate emergencies. So you see, all these things are connected through plants and health and environment. And that's spiritual also. But if you don't mind my taking the last 2 minutes here,
Absolutely.
to look at this question of what happens if the scientists give us the terminal diagnosis. Okay, well, already people are going through extreme mental stress, emotional stress. And there is a term that's now coming out, eco-despair. People are looking at the condition of the world, and they see no way to live a full life. Their future is disappearing. You know, they're raising kids, and you know, they despair for the future of their kids and all of this. And this will only get worse as the condition worsens around us, you see. But that is where we have to look at two very important terms and their relationship. One is apocalypse, and the other is dharma. And guess what? They're two sides of the same coin. So in this very brief discussion, I use these terms with the following translations. Apocalypse is, of course, what we think of happening around us, and the term apocalyptic is being used more and more. That was a term in the media to describe what daytime looked like in San Francisco a few weeks ago with the fires. It was apocalyptic, according to the BBC, okay? Yeah. And so apocalypse as disaster is being used more commonly. But the original meaning of apocalypse is from the Greek, and it means revelation. It means the lifting of the veils, all right? And so what that means is that we are moving into a time where we cannot put a spin on things anymore, okay? It means that the truth is being revealed, and that's a spiritual opportunity. Now, the truth being revealed is dharma, okay? And the word dharma, the way I use it here, is universal truth, all right? And I also use it meaning spiritual practice, okay? The practice of truth in whatever form is truthful for us. But the opposite of dharma is apocalypse, because guess what? If we apply the truth at a deep enough level, guess what it leads to? It leads to a personal apocalypse. It leads to realizing that everything we think about ourselves is not ultimately real. And it leads to a complete deconstruction of ourselves at a very deep level, which is what liberates us, you see. And so now the final point in this train of thought here is it's very interesting to look back historically, because 2,500 years ago, Buddha gave a sermon that's very famous. It's titled the Fire Sermon. And in that sermon, he said, monks, the world is on fire. And he went through and he described all the ways that the world was on fire, but it wasn't external. It's on fire in your mind. Your mind is on fire. Your eyes are on fire. Your sense taste is on fire. You are on fire with mental delusions. You are on fire with inflamed emotions and disordered mental states. Therefore, practice dharma and put out the fires and liberate yourself from this world, okay? Now, this is a very profound thing, because if we really look at the spiritual traditions, nowhere is there anything about we should save the world. It's all about the world is impermanent. The world is a place of suffering. The world is a place of destruction. And we have very little time to find inner peace that is transcendent of the world. So if the scientists say, that's it, Homo sapiens is going extinct, it's all over, then what are we going to do? Are we going to collectively go insane, or are we going to collectively become enlightened? And, you know, the prescription that Buddha gave when he was talking about extinguishing the fires within ourselves and becoming enlightened, the primary method that he taught was study impermanence. Break the attachment to the world. Don't try to save the world. Try to save yourself by breaking the attachment that is the profound ignorance that links you to the world. And that doesn't mean that you're going to disappear. It means that it's going to make you a complete human being that has fulfilled your spiritual potential. All right. And I think that's the great opportunity that is there for us, is to realize that. It's like the culmination of all the spiritual teachings come to that, if this is what we're going to be facing collectively with ecological breakdown. So that's my answer.
Amazing.
Several answers.
Thank you. Several answers. Absolutely amazing. And I'm not sure we talked about smell, but we, in a roundabout way, absolutely.
I can talk about smell.
Yeah,
We'll go over time though. We are over time. So you tell me.
we are over time, but I do want to just, in case everybody's wondering, Floracopeia, and that sounds familiar, here's the little bottle of which I've got so many of them. And I thank my dear friend Everin Deva, who I think was the one who first introduced me to Floracopeia, and who actually recently wrote a beautiful, beautiful article on Dharma and Karma. It was quite exquisite. So maybe we can finish with everybody has to, I sense from what you're saying, everybody really has to sort of buckle down and find their ground, find their truth, and stay very, very grounded in that truth. That's easier said than done for many. Just finding your truth is difficult, especially if someone is a little vitiated with the air and space element, which is in Ayurveda's Vata. They go back and forth in their mind. So in today's world, let's talk about smell. Are there some scents or some smells that are available that can help a person, in a sense, just come inside and just be for a second, and then let the rest just sort of happen organically?
Yes, there's so many. And that's the beauty of aromatherapy is that it is not, it's broad spectrum and non-specific, okay? But here's the thing about herbal medicine, including aromatherapy, is that there's two ways to approach it. One is that we can use herbs and essential oils to support our spiritual practices. Or we can use herbs and essential oils as a spiritual practice, okay? And so using herbs and essential oils to support our spiritual practice means that we can drink relaxing teas and we can breathe relaxing essential oils, mostly the flower oils or the sacred woods, you know, like sandalwood and agar wood, or the sacred resins that have been used forever, like, you know, frankincense, wood like Palo Santo and things like that, the sacred scents, or the flowers. Those are the two main groups of oils that are very supportive of meditation practice. And then there's all the herbs that support meditation practice, many of the adaptogens and the ones that support cognitive function. Things like the reishi mushroom has been documented for 2,000 years in Chinese medicine to help meditation. And now we know that it protects the brain. Okay, so that's using herbs and essential oils to support our meditation practice, our spiritual practice, and that includes just helping us with our mental health. Herbs and essential oils can help us so much with stress reduction and emotional well-being, and helping us metabolize bad news, and, you know, helping us to feel more motivated. They can help with our mental health, and in a certain way, spiritual practice is establishing mental health, okay? And we need spiritual practice to improve our mental health, especially now. And mental health issues have brought countless people in every generation to spiritual practice. But the other way, and this is where you get the answer about, you know, how to use fragrance, is that herbs and essential oils can be the practice themselves, okay? And that means that, especially with mental health issues, we cannot expect herbs and essential oils to just magically cure us of deep depression, of existential despair, of these kind of things. They're not antidepressant drugs. They don't control our mind, okay? But there are our friends and our allies, and we can ask them to support us in our own spiritual practice. And the way we make them a spiritual practice is that we don't just mindlessly drink the tea. We drink the tea as a meditation, and we feel the body sensations as a meditation. And the beauty of using aromatherapy in this particular way is it opens up what we could call contemplative aromatherapy. And you can take an oil and you can put it on a perfume strip, or you can put a couple drops on a fingertip and you can breathe it, and you can make that your meditation practice. And what you will contact is first the fragrance. But then with a little bit of study, you learn that inside that fragrance, there are molecules. And then you learn that those molecules were created by the plant. And then you learn that the molecules were created by the pranic evolutionary intelligence of the plant, which is more intelligent than humans in many ways, because they've been around for millions of years and we may not be around for very long. And then you realize that that intelligence was brought to life by the sun and the moon and the nutrients in the soil and the water. And then you realize that, oh, inside that fragrance, there's all this cosmology. And then you can actually feel the cosmology becoming part of your body. And you can do the same with herbs also. And that way we reestablish the connection between the plant, its intelligence, the 5 elements that are in it, earth, water, fire, air, space, the sun and the moon, and its prana. And we can feel how it relates to the 5 elements and the prana of our body and our mind. Now, we're not reestablishing anything. That's the way it is every moment, you see. But when we use plants in this particular way, we can go into very deep meditative states where we can actually start to dissolve our identification process with this body, with this personality, with this time and space. And we can actually start to feel that at a deeper level that we are the prana. And it's the same prana that's in the plants, and it's the same prana that's all around us. And we can actually dissolve our sense of self back into these broader fields of energies and elements. And these energies and elements are ultimately more real than who we think we are. And so that's how we can go step by step into a spiritual practice using aromatherapy in a contemplative way. So I hope that answers that question.
And we accomplished our mission. We talked about smell. I can't thank you enough. I just and for our viewers, yes, we are 10 minutes over. I'm sure you're delighted that we are. So thank you, David, so much. This is just really wonderful and very informative, and I just am so honored that you would support this very humble sort of grassroots seva endeavor. So thank you deeply, and yeah.
My pleasure. Right. And thank you for the work that you're doing.
It's
and to everybody who's joined us.
Yeah, exactly. So thank you so much.